RFK, he actually made it. He's in. He's confirmed. Tell me about your thoughts.
Woo!
Yes, that's good.
I was
Excited.
I was watching. I just felt like it dragged for so long because he had to go through the finance committee, then the health committee, and then once they voted, those two committees voted, then we had to wait almost, was it like a week or 2 weeks? We had to wait almost like 2 weeks for them to go into the voting of the Senate, and then he was confirmed. So this was almost like a 3-week process.
We were worried for a minute.
I freaked out for a second.
There was like doctor signing things and yeah.
Yeah, that was scary, but I'm glad they confirmed. I mean, the hearings were brutal. I mean, I was watching the actual hearing, especially with the finance committee, where they were drilling him with a lot of questions about Medicaid and Medicare. And I was watching that video in the office in between patients. At some point, I had to turn it off because at that point, I was almost giving like pissed off adjustments, you know? I was like, my goodness. And I remember I was telling you, I was like, I don't know how he does it. You told me, I don't know how his wife is able to stand there and watch all these guys ask him all these questions. So it was very stressful. But I did like the when he called Bernie Sanders out regarding, you're the first one that takes money from Big Pharma, and Bernie freaked out.
Yeah, he freaked out.
They kept going back and forth too. It was funny.
It was
Yeah.
good.
What were you gonna say, Hennessy?
The whole time I remember texting you. That was the first time, and I was just saying to Andres, I can just feel for his wife because everything how they were treating him, I was in shock. I was like, I don't know if I could even handle that being in the same room. These people were very disrespectful. But hey, I'm glad that he won.
They wouldn't let him. They would ask a question, and they would take all the time so he couldn't answer the question. And the whole conversation was about Medicare, Medicaid, which is fine, you know. But I mean, it's such a complex system. How do they expect him to know every intricacy about Medicaid? I mean, we talked about it.
They don't. They're just building points to try to point fingers, which is sad because ultimately it doesn't propel us in a positive direction, no matter which way you think about it, you know?
Yeah.
So.
One of the things that I liked about in one of the hearings, they talk about funding, right? And how most of our research with an NIH, CDC, it's all based upon, we got to research, what's it called? Infectious disease. That's pretty much what the budget is going to. He's like, but let's be honest. Is that the real problem that we have in America? Which is not. It's chronic illness. So that's the one thing that I felt all these senators kept bringing back: the vaccine issue, the Medicaid issue.
Yeah.
They kept bringing back the funding issue. And and then we're on the other side just listening to the whole argument going back and forth. It's like, hey, the big issue is chronic illness. That's what's literally killing Americans right now.
But it's almost like they want to keep that quiet. They don't want to talk about that.
I think there's a lot of money. I mean, you create the disease, then you create the pill to mask the disease that you just created, and it just becomes a cash cow.
So for people who didn't get a chance to watch this, you said you watched the hearings and stuff. I know a lot of people probably did not, right? And so you might be watching this and they haven't watched that. What would you say is like one of the big issues? You just talked about one of them, but what kind of stuck out to each of you individually about the hearings and what's going on, and what RFK is bringing forth to us that's going to make a real difference in their life, the person who's listening to this life?
You guys can go first.
I'll start. One of the things that stuck with me then that I asked you, they kept bringing the fact of how he's against vaccines. And multiple times he was very clear that he's not against vaccines. What he's saying is we need to make sure that the process that every vaccine,
Every medication,
every vaccine that has ever been made goes through this process of research and making sure that not only we know the short-term consequences, but also the long-term. He's just saying, hey,
do due diligence. Yeah.
Exactly. And then they just kept bringing that up, and these people are not listening. That was very frustrating.
I saw a headline that said that RFK said that none of the 72 vaccines that are mandated for children have actually been properly tested.
Well, no, I think a lot of these research papers, which is another part of this conversation, is who did the research? Was it the actual company that created the pill or created the vaccine, or was it done by a third party that is not biased? That's the other question. And I haven't looked at all the research papers, but I know there's a lot of collusion between pharmaceutical companies and these
The medical research.
and yeah, exactly, because NIH and CDC, they receive grants from the pharmaceutical companies. They receive money from it. So the other question is, who are the directors of the NIH and the CDC and the FDA, which are usually, they have a background in pharmaceuticals. Even when before they did the voting for in Congress for RFK, Chuck Schumer, which is a Democrat, he stood up and he talked about how unqualified RFK was. And he said, there's so many people out there that have a pharmaceutical background. And I was like, why would we want somebody from the pharmaceutical industry to lead HHS?
No, I agree. I agree. One of the big problems for me is that even those vaccines that go through a lot of clinical trials and such before their approval have gaps in their long-term testing and also testing that reflects real-world conditions.
Sure.
And it makes a big difference, and we don't see that until it's too late.
What I didn't get a chance to look at, the research or the stats on it. But right now, our kids are taking 72 doses before a certain age. How many other countries that are developed, right? Let's say England, Canada, etc., are also taking 72 doses. I don't know the stats on that, but we should look into it. I don't think there's any other country that takes that many doses of vaccine when you're that young.
Just we're all 40-ish range, 30 to 45-ish range, right?
Wow, that gap.
How old are you, Dr. Winston?
I didn't ask that question.
None of your business.
But I was going to say, when we were kids, if you did take vaccines, there were not nearly as many as now.
Yeah.
There's the schedule is so demanding now.
My question is, and obviously I'm vaccinated. My parents didn't know any better, obviously. But what happened from the 1990s forward? Did we suddenly get attacked by that many diseases that now we had a major increase in doses?
No, but I mean, there's money to be made in that process as well. And when these larger corporations are financially entangled with these health organizations, all of a sudden it's not surprising that these mandates are for more use of these vaccines because they benefit from that.
And a lot of these people from Congress, Congresswomen and congressmen, they probably make a lot of money from this. And I felt like the vaccine conversation was very delicate. There was very few people from Congress that actually approached the conversation from a science perspective of let's have a healthy debate. But almost everything was like, if you cut the funding, if you do this, they're safe, they're effective, we're not going to research it anymore. It almost felt like they didn't want to uncover something. There was probably, the only one I can think about is Rand Paul. He was one of the few that actually approached the conversation from a honest, let's have a debate, let's figure this out. I mean, our autism rates are up. A lot of people are sick.
Well, and the interesting thing is Trump and RFK have been talking about eliminating mandates for vaccines for schools and for things.
He already wrote an executive order.
And I think that's where it's most important because, one, it's about choice. All of us as individuals have the choice to vaccinate ourselves or your choice to vaccinate your children. So taking that choice, I think, is the bigger problem, not necessarily the vaccine themselves, but then still not knowing what the long-term effects of the vaccines are and just kind of accepting, oh, they've been great. Vaccines are life-changing. They're saving the world. But just like, comments that I make with other medications like aspirin that we might be talking about later, where it's absolutely great and you need to do it, and then you find out down the road that there's actually negatives. And so he's basically saying we need to pay attention to these down the road negatives that could pop up that we just aren't aware of yet.
Yeah. And isn't it crazy that we advocate and many doctors advocate for individualized medical or health care, yet when it comes to certain things, it's all cookie cutter?
Yeah.
For example, 72, do you think every single child in North America has to take 72 doses? No. Every single one. Do you think every human being, every adult over 60 has to take an aspirin?
Right.
Right. It can't be cookie cutter, because the moment we go into a cookie cutter healthcare system, everybody gets sick, or not everybody benefits.
No, absolutely.
Genesis, what were you going to say?
Yeah. Speaking of that, everyone definitely is different. But over the weekend, there was a post about RFK. They were just bashing him. And I posted something. That's not the important part. But someone replied to me.
Everyone go look at it.
Someone said, you are ignoring that this man believes black people don't deserve the same medical treatment as white people. Says a ton about you, Genesis. Then I was thinking, there's stuff like, there's diseases out there like sickle cell. Mm-hmm. You heard of sickle cell?
Yeah, it's more prone in the African American population.
The only reason why I know that is because I play volleyball in college. We have the first male basketball athlete that made it to the NBA with sickle cell. Wonderful guy. And I mean, it's inspiring to know his story, but even knowing that, I know him, but people don't know that, and it's kind of crazy that people take this personal and they want to make it about
race
and stuff. We're talking about health, and it's important that people know.
It is.
For them to know that every child is different. They're going to react differently.
And based on your background.
It's different.
Yeah.
And there's genetic predisposition depending on your race. I mean, it happens even to Latinos. You know, we have a predisposition to certain conditions compared to the white American or the African American, et cetera, right? That's just common sense if you look at biology. So, and the reason they're saying that is because in the hearings, he said in one of the in the questions, he's like, shouldn't we look at a different schedule for different types of people? Which I think it's a fair question, right? If you're sick or you're healthy or you have this genetic background, shouldn't we do a different vaccine schedule based on research, right? Or same thing with medications in general.
Or if you're coming in, like our son was born premature, or you have a toxic overload because of some situation, maybe your parent or your mother had drug issues. Like, I don't know. There's so many different circumstances of how kids come in the world, and we're not.
Exactly. I mean, and Rand Paul called it, when he talks about in the hearing about hepatitis B vaccine. It's like, hey, my wife is healthy. I'm healthy. We're negative for hepatitis. Why should my child that's a few weeks old should get a hepatitis B shot?
Right.
I mean, that's only for people that are infected if they're positive. So going back to the hearing, I mean, it was pretty stressful. The amount of times that they brought up the vaccine conversation and he kept going back and forth. It's all about freedom of choice, right? And again, choices do have consequences from both sides. If you choose to vaccinate your kid, there might be some consequences. If you choose not to, there's also consequences. And as an adult and as a parent, you got to be okay with those consequences.
And that's the big point that I make. That's exactly what I'm saying, is that you need to have the choice, and you also have to deal with the consequence. There's no right choice that has no negative consequence ultimately in the end.
Would you think that overall, that's really what RFK is doing, is he's giving people their freedom back for choices in their healthcare, as well as giving them knowledge to make choices without being swayed? Do you think that overall is what the whole thing's about?
Absolutely.
That's the platform. It's freedom of choice, chronic illness, and let's eliminate corruption. Those are the three top things that he's shooting for. He's attempting to uncover in this next 2 to 4 years, etc.
So someone listening to this who maybe doesn't have a medical background, isn't as involved in this, hasn't been watching it, what would be the final thing you would want to say to them about RFK getting confirmed after hearing all this? What would you want them to know?
Give the guy a chance.
Yeah, sometimes the system needs disruption in order to reassess priorities and look at things from a different angle. and kind of start questioning the norms as they are right now. That's progress.
Yeah, and for people that do not follow the situation or they don't like to get involved in politics, which again, we're approaching this from a healthcare perspective. This is beyond politics and red and blue, etc. But the one thing that I want people to ask themselves is like, what we're doing right now, is it working? Our current healthcare system, is it actually working? It's clearly not working. So we got to do something different, because if we keep doing the same thing we're doing, expecting different results, what is that?
Crazy.
Yeah, or insanity.
Also,
right?
You and I were talking over the weekend. What if the Democrats were in power, right? Instead of Donald Trump, would you have the same belief, or would you think the same way as you're thinking of?
If the
RFK?
same conversations were happening, but there was different people.
Yeah.
So basically be open-minded and try to look at it.
I think it's because I've had some discussions in YouTube and TikTok with the videos that we post. And as we keep going through question after question after question about RFK, it always boils down to he's not on my side of the party, right? Or it's a partisan issue.
Funniest thing, didn't RFK actually originally run for president as a Democrat?
Yeah. I mean, he had his own platform, but he was more on the Democratic side.
Just saying.
Yeah. So it's messed up. So I think I wish people saw this not from a political perspective, but more from a healthcare perspective.
Yeah, I'm constantly trying to get that separation. This is what it is. This is where we're going to be for the next few years. So now, rather than looking at this as a party issue, take every different situation that's happening based on these political changes and assess them based on your life and how they benefit or don't benefit. You can't just say, because this is driven by the Republicans, I don't benefit from this in any way. This is all negative, because now you're kind of putting yourself in that box. And if you are someone, for instance, that is from that, say, lower income, where you don't have always have the medicine and the healthcare that you need, when you put yourself in your box, so now you're not even willing to go out there and see what's available to you, because you already assume it's already against you. Yeah. Now you're putting yourself in the same box and creating a bigger problem.
Man, and if you listen to his statement, which I've heard it so many times, he's very consistent with statement. For the last 20 years, every morning when I wake up, I get on my knees and I pray that God put me in a position where I can end the chronic disease epidemic. I was like, how can you not get after that? And people get stuck on the idea. It's like, he's going to take away our vaccines and everybody's going to die. I was like, no, where is that on the policies? Like, I never heard him say that we're going to take away your vaccines.
Right. Just give you your choice.
Yeah, we're going to give you your choice back as a parent.